The first thing I noticed about her was her feet. Bare, bleeding, moving fast through the red mud like she already knew what running for your life felt like. Like it wasn't the first time. I'd been up since, before the crow of that rooster my neighbor kept, patching the south fence line where 3 of my cattle had pushed through in the night. Wyoming morning, cold enough to see your breath. Still enough that when a twig snapped in those cottonwoods by the creek, I heard it clear as a gunshot. I turned slow, kept my hands visible. Out here you learned that much. She came out of the tree line like a wounded deer, half crouching, one hand pressed flat against her ribs, hair a mess of black down around her face. Apache, I figured from the beadwork, still clinging to what was left of her dress. She was young, not a child, but close enough to the edge of it that something tight and ugly settled in my chest the moment I saw the condition she was in. Her eyes hit me first, then her feet, then the bruises along her jaw. She froze when she saw me. I'd seen that look on animals caught in wire. That perfect stillness where the baboon seemed calculating whether to drop dead or explode in every direction at once. I dropped the fencing pliers in the mud, slow, made sure she saw it. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said. My Spanish was decent, my Apache was non-existent. But I kept my voice to the tone you'd use on a spooked horse, and I held my hands out, and I stayed absolutely still. She didn't run. That surprised me more than anything. My name is James Colt Merritt. Most people just called me Colt. I'd been running the Merritt quarter section for 6 years by then. Inherited it from my father's brother who died without a wife or children, which I always thought was the saddest kind of death a man could have. The land was good, hard but good. The kind that asked everything of you and gave back exactly what it thought you deserved. I lived alone. I liked it that way, mostly. My nearest neighbor was a widow woman named Clara Hutchins, who was 73 years old and terrifying, and made the best sourdough biscuits in the county. She'd told me 4 times to find a wife. I'd told her 4 times that the cattle didn't care whether I was married. I mention all of this because you have to understand what kind of man I was before that morning. The quiet kind. The kind that didn't go looking for trouble. Trouble found me standing in 6 inches of Wyoming mud, with a pair of fencing pliers at my feet, and a girl I didn't know bleeding into the dirt of my south pasture. She let me walk toward her. That alone told me how desperate she was. I crouched down when I got close enough, tried to make myself smaller. She was watching my hands like a hawk watches a field mouse, and I kept them visible, kept them moving slow. "Water?" I said. "Mime drinking." Something shifted in her face. Just a fraction. I pointed toward the house. A squat, solid thing about 200 yards back. Smoke already coming from the chimney where I'd left the stove going. "Inside. Come inside." She shook her head. Sharp. "Okay." I didn't push it. "Okay. Wait here." I walked back to the house without rushing. Every instinct I had was telling me to hurry, but hurrying would have been the wrong thing. I went inside, filled my largest canteen, grabbed the clean flour sack I used for bandages when a calf tore itself up on wire, and came back out with my hands full and visible and no gun belt on. She was still there. She looked almost surprised about it herself. Her name was Saya. I didn't learn that until the second day. The first day she sat in my barn, her choice not mine, wrapped in an old blanket I'd left at the door, with water and food. And I went about my work and pretended not to watch her from across the yard. She ate everything I brought her. Drank 3 canteens worth of water. Slept in the hay like she hadn't slept in days, which I later learned was the truth. That first night I sat on my porch with my rifle across my lap. Not pointed at the barn, pointed at the tree line. Whatever she was running from, it would come from that direction. I wasn't sure what I'd do when it did. I'm a man who thinks things through, plans, measures twice. But sitting there in the dark with the stars spread out overhead, like God had spilled salt across a black table, all I could think about was how small she looked. How young. How the bruising along her jaw was the specific kind that came from a hand, not a fall. You didn't have to know a woman's story to recognize that. The second morning she came out of the barn on her own. Her feet were wrapped. She'd found the rags I'd left near the water bucket and done the job herself, neat and tight. She moved stiffly, but with a kind of determined quiet that I already recognized as particular to her. She didn't say anything. She walked to the chicken coop, looked at it for a moment, and then went inside and collected every egg in there. She brought them to me, set them on the porch rail one by one. Thank you, I said, which was idiotic because she'd gotten them from my chickens, but I didn't know what else to say. Sasa, she said, and pointed at herself. Colt. I pointed at my chest. She considered this. Colt. Like she was testing how it sat in her mouth, she nodded once, apparently satisfied, and went back toward the barn. Then she stopped, turned around. Man comes, she said. Her English was careful, deliberate, like she'd been storing up words for a long time. He comes for me. Who? I asked. Something dark moved across her face. My father. Here is what I pieced together over the following days, in broken English and patience and the occasional word of Spanish that she seemed to understand when all else failed. Her father was a man called Nana Chato, half Apache, half something else, and fully a man who'd understood a long time ago that the world was changing, and he meant to profit from it however he could. He'd made his living for years as a go-between, someone who could move between the Apache camps and the white settlements, carrying messages, trading information, making himself useful to whoever was in power. When Saya's mother died, she'd been Anglo, which was where Saya got the green eyes that startled you if you weren't expecting them. Nana Chato's usefulness had started to slip. He was older. The camps he'd relied on were disappearing. The reservation system was swallowing everything. So he'd found a different kind of trade. There was a man, a rancher near Laramie, named Harwick. Old, mean money, the kind that had survived by consuming everything around it. He'd seen Saya at a trading post the previous spring and made an offer. Nana Chato had taken it. Saya had found out 3 days before the arrangement was to be completed. She'd run that night. She'd been running for 8 days when she crossed my south fence line. I won't pretend I handled this perfectly. My first instinct was rage, the clean, bright kind that doesn't leave room for thinking. A father selling his daughter. The word for that isn't complicated. It's just ugly. But rage wasn't what Saya needed from me. She needed steadiness. I was steady. You can stay, I said the second evening, sitting across from her at my kitchen table. She'd moved from the barn to the house that afternoon. Tentative at first, touching the door frame as she came through, like she was checking whether it was real. As long as you need. She looked at me for a long time. Those green eyes were unnerving in the best possible way. They had a quality of assessment too for them, like she was cataloging everything about you and deciding what to do with the information. Why? She asked. I thought about giving her the pretty answer, the righteous one. Instead, I said, because what's happening to you is wrong. That's reason enough. She thought about this for a while. They will come here, she said. Maybe. He will bring men, probably. You could. She stopped. Searched for the word. You could say you never saw me. Be safe that way. I looked at her across the table. At the bruise along her jaw and the way her feet were still wrapped in rags because I hadn't had time to get to town for proper bandages. At the absolute lack of self-pity in her expression, which wrecked me more than tears would have. That's not the kind of man I am, I said. She started to trust me in small pieces. That's the only way I know how to describe it. Like she'd taken whatever trust she had left and broken it into the smallest possible units. And she parceled them out, one at a time, watching to see what I did with each one before she gave me the next. First, she trusted me with her name. Then with her presence in the house. Then with the story of her mother, told in fragments on a cold afternoon when I was mending a bridle at the table, and she was watching the snow come down outside. The first snow of the season, early, and it seemed to make her melancholy. Her mother had been from Pennsylvania, had come west with a church group, had met Nana Chato and made a choice that her family never forgave her for, and had spent her life loving a man who was mostly good at first, and then less good over time. She loved him, Saya said. It didn't sound like a defense. Just a fact she'd made peace with. Did you? I asked. About her father. I shouldn't have. It was too direct. She was quiet for a long time. He was my father, she said finally. That is different from love. On the 5th day they came. I'd been expecting it. Had my rifle by the door and my revolver on my hip, and Clara Hutchins knew to stay inside her house and keep her shutters closed. 3 men rode into my yard at mid-morning. 2 I didn't recognize. The third, the one riding the good horse, The one who sat like a man who decided a long time ago that the world owed him something. I took to be Nana Chato. He was maybe 50, lean, well-dressed in a way that was trying too hard. He had Saya's eyes, which was the thing that made my jaw tight. "Morning," I said from my porch. "Morning." He was polite, carefully polite. The way men are when they want something from you. "I'm looking for a girl. Apache, mixed blood, green eyes. She would have come through here a few days ago." "Lots of people come through," I said. I don't keep track." His eyes went to the barn, the smoke from the chimney, to the second coffee cup sitting on my porch rail which I'd left there deliberately, which I now hoped he noticed. "This would be my daughter," he said. "She's unwell. I've come to bring her home." "She's not here," I said. "Mind if we look around?" "I do mind," I said. "This is my land. You don't look around my land without an invitation." One of his men shifted on his horse. His hand moved toward his belt. I looked at that man directly. Said nothing. Didn't move. He stopped moving. Nana Chato studied me for a long moment. He was calculating something. I let him calculate. "She's a confused girl," he said. "Whatever she's told you." "Nobody told me anything," I said. "She's not here. You're welcome to ride on." Another long silence. Then he smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't involve his eyes. "I'll find her," he said. Not to me, just out loud, just for the world to hear. He turned his horse. They rode out. Saya had been in the root cellar under the kitchen floor. She'd gone down without a word when we'd heard the horses, just looked at me once, that assessing look. And I'd nodded and lifted the hatch, and she'd dropped down into the dark without complaint. When I lifted the hatch again and offered her my hand, she took it. She came up out of the dark and stood in my kitchen, and her hands were steady, and her face was composed. And then she sat down at the table and pressed her palms flat on the wood, and took 3 long, slow breaths. "He'll come back," she said. "He will," I agreed. "With more men, probably. And Harwick." She said the name like it was something rotten. "Harwick has money. He will make it legal. Make me the problem." She was right about all of it. That was the shape of the world then, and I knew it. I sat down across from her, thought about things for a while. "There's a woman named Clara Hutchins," I said. "Neighbor of mine. She knows everyone in this county, and she is scared of exactly nobody. And there's a sheriff in Laramie named Patterson who owes me a favor going back 5 years." Saya watched me. "I'm not saying it's simple," I said. "It isn't. But there are ways through this that don't end with you going anywhere you don't choose to go." "You would do this," she said, "for someone you don't know." "I know you some," I said. 5 days is 5 days. Something moved across her face then. Something that wasn't the careful assessment I'd gotten used to. Something younger and rawer than that. She looked away, out the window, at the snow that was still coming down. "My mother used to say," she said slowly, "that a good man is rarer than water in August." I didn't say anything. "She was usually right about things," Saya added. "I won't bore you with the legal particulars. They weren't simple, and they weren't quick. And there were 3 weeks in there where I slept with one eye open, and my rifle, within arm's reach every single night. Sheriff Patterson turned out to be worth every bit of that favor. He knew Harwick. Had known him for years, the way lawmen know men like that, with a particular tired wariness that said, "I've been waiting for you to overreach." When I laid out what was happening, what Nana Chato had arranged, Patterson's face did something complicated and then went very calm. "That girl's mother was American," he said. "Yes," I said, "which makes that girl American. That's my understanding." Patterson picked up his hat. "That changes some things," he said. Clara Hutchins, meanwhile, had connections I hadn't known about. She'd been in Wyoming since before it was Wyoming. And she knew which families had standing, and which ministers had influence, and which judges cared about doing right, and which cared about doing right only if it was convenient. She worked those networks with a thoroughness that made me feel like a slow child. Between the two of them, by the time Nana Chato came back with a letter from Harwick and 2 men who were very clearly not cowboys, they ran into a wall they hadn't expected. It wasn't a perfect wall. Nothing is perfect. But it held. Saya stayed through the winter. This wasn't a decision we announced or discussed. It just happened the way things happen when people are busy surviving. One day becomes the next, and eventually you look up, and 3 months have passed, and the shape of your life has changed around you while you weren't watching. She was the hardest worker I'd ever shared a property with, which is saying something, because I'd worked alongside men who'd been doing physical labor their whole lives. She fixed things without being asked. She had a knowledge of plants and weather and animal behavior that was different from mine, but complementary to it. She'd notice things I'd walk right past, and I started watching her watch things and learning. She taught me some words. Not enough to be useful, but enough to make her laugh, which turned out to be one of my primary goals by about week 3. Because her laugh kind that started and quiet and grew, and she always seemed a little surprised by it herself. I taught her chess. She beat me by the second week. I told her she'd cheated, which was not true, and she looked at me with those green eyes and said, "You lost. This is the word." And I said, "Yes, ma'am, that is the word," and she smiled. We were careful with each other, both of us. We understood, I think, that what was between us was fragile in the specific way that things are fragile when they matter. So we moved slowly, talked, ate together, argued about the best way to mend a fence line, and about whether my sourdough was worth eating, and about bigger things this too, about what had been done to her people, about what the future looked like from where she was standing, about whether a life could be rebuilt out of pieces as this scattered. "You think too much," she told me once. "You think efficiently," I said. "I think too much. Between us, we come out about right." She considered this seriously, the way she considered everything seriously. Then she nodded. The night she kissed me, and yes, she kissed me, she did not wait for me to get around to it, which I would not have done for another 6 months at least. She told me first. That was her way. She told me what she was going to do, and then she waited for me to say anything that needed saying. I had nothing to say. We were sitting by the fire, late. The schwa's quiet, the way ranches are, in deep winter, sealed up against the cold, the whole world reduced to a small warm circle of light. She'd been reading. I'd been getting books from town, and she went through them fast. Remembered everything, had opinions about all of it. She set the book down, looked at me across the fire. "I've decided something," she said. "All right," I said. "I am going to stay," she said. "If you want that, I am going to stay here with you." My heart did something stupid and large in my chest. "And also," she said, "I am going to kiss you now, so if you have an objection, you should say it." I did not have an objection. What I had, it turned out, was exactly what I hadn't known I was missing for 6 years of quiet mornings, and long, solitary evenings, and cattle that didn't care whether I was married. She was small, but she kissed like someone who had decided a thing completely, and was following through, and I put my hand against her face, and felt the place where the bruise had been, healed now, gone. And I thought about all the things that had happened to bring her to this chair, this fire, this moment, and I thought, not one more hard thing. Not one more. I meant it. "We were married in April," Clara Hutchins cried. She would deny this if you asked her. "Sheriff Patterson came and ate 3 servings of everything, and told Saya she was too good for me, and told me privately, walking back to his horse, that he was glad it had worked out. He said it the way men say things they mean but aren't comfortable meaning, quickly, without looking at you. 'Thank you,' I said, 'for what you did.' 'Right is right,' he said. Climbed on his horse. Rode off. Nana Chato never came back. I don't know what happened to him. I didn't look. Some stories have clean endings and some just stop, and you learn to accept the stopping. Harwick died 2 years later of something wrong with his heart, which struck most people who'd met him as entirely appropriate. The thing about Saya, the thing I couldn't have told you that first morning, watching her come out of the tree line on bleeding feet, is that she was already the stronger of the two of us. She'd suffered things I hadn't. She'd made decisions under pressure I'd never faced. She'd crossed 200 miles of hard country alone, and arrived at a stranger's fence line, and made a choice to trust when trust had cost her everything before. That kind of strength doesn't announce itself. It just shows up, does the work, collects the eggs, learns chess and beats you in 2 weeks, and acts like it's nothing. She built a garden that summer. That was the envy of every woman in the county. She learned to ride my best horse better than I rode him. She argued with Clara Hutchins about everything, and they became, impossibly, the closest of friends. She was fierce with our children when they came. 2 of them, a boy, and then a girl. Fierce in the way of someone who understood exactly how much it cost to bring a life safely through the world, and what was owed to that life in return. Every night, for years, I would look across whatever room we were in and feel that same thing I'd felt that first night on the porch, with my rifle across my lap and the stars overhead. Not quite peace. Something better than peace. Responsibility. The good kind. The kind that means you are holding something worth holding. She asked me once, years in, we were sitting on that same porch, different season, different version of both of us. She asked me if I'd been afraid. That morning at the fence line. A little, I said. What about you? Very much, she said. No hesitation. You didn't show it. Showing it would have been stupid, she said, matter of fact. And then, after a moment, I saw your face when you put down the pliers. What about it? She looked at me, those green eyes. All these years and they still startled me. I saw that you were angry, she said. About what had been done, not at me, about it. She paused. That was the thing. That was how I knew. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say to that. She leaned against my shoulder. I put my arm around her. Below us, the south pasture spread out golden in the late afternoon light. The fence line I'd been patching that morning was long repaired, long forgotten. The cottonwoods by the creek were full-leafed and loud with birds. The world was doing what the world does, moving forward, demanding everything we let it, together.